Hi, good afternoon. I'm Steph Hopper. I'm one of the directors of the talent practice at Capfinity, and welcome to our latest episode of Lead Strong. I'm joined by my co-host Celine Floyd, who is the other director of the talent practice. Just a few words on Capfinity. We are a global business based in Birmingham, London, Dublin, various US locations and Sydney, Australia. And we've been helping organisations to find candidates, develop employees and transform their business around our sort of USP of strengths-based assessment and development for over 17 years. Celine and I head up the talent practice together. We support organisations to identify and develop their talent all the way through from early careers to the exec leadership at the top of an organisation through that market-leading method of strengths. Hi, Celine. Welcome.
Hi, Steph. It is great to have you back after your short hiatus 2 weeks ago. I feel like all is well again in the world. Now you are back on my side. Lovely to see you. And welcome to our 29th episode. Really interesting session today looking at purpose-led leadership. And we are joined by two fantastic guests. So Celine Floyd, as Steph said, the other director of the talent practice. My specialist area is in assessment. So talent and leadership assessment from apprentice level all the way up to board, supporting organisations with the design and delivery of assessments globally. So, as I just said, we have two fantastic guests in Tom and Christine today. I feel it would be wonderful for the audience to hear a little bit more about you both. So perhaps coming to Christine first, if you could say hello to our group and just share a little bit more about yourself and why you're passionate about the topic of leadership generally.
Fantastic. Thank you, Celine. It's great to see you again. And hi, Steph, as well. So it's good to be with you. Thank you for having me. I'm Christine Ellis. I'm the People Director in the Aviva Life business. And I've actually worked with Aviva for over 20 years. So actually, good connection there to what we're talking about today in terms of purpose-led leadership, which I'm sure we'll come back to in a little while. So I've spent the majority of my career with Aviva in the people function, doing a whole range of different people function roles, specialist roles, business partnering roles, people director roles. I've also spent quite a bit of time out in some of our subsidiary business units as well. So I've previously owned a big estate agency chain, and I headed that up for a little while on the people side. And I also spent 4 years in our international markets, looking after the people teams across our European markets in particular. So quite a long time in Aviva. I did work in manufacturing before that, so a few kind of different experiences around leadership in that space as well. But financial services for the last 20 or so years. I'm very, very passionate about leadership. We've talked about this many, many times, but I really, really believe that the biggest transformation lever that any organisation has is the quality of its leadership. It is more important than digitisation, automation, new technology in my mind. The way to really, really transform and unlock potential in organisations is through having the best possible leadership. So delighted to be with you today.
Oh, we're delighted to have you. Thank you. And amazing to hear about your career and the many hats you've worn in that career. Really fascinating. And I love that around the transformation leader. So can't wait to hear more from you, Christine. And Tom, welcome. Same to you.
Well, again, thank you very much for having me. Absolutely delighted to be here. Yes, my name's Tom Lawton. I'm a leadership development coach. I really focus in on the personal development side. That's such a big part of that, as opposed to perhaps the professional skills in there. How is it we bring ourselves to our leadership? How do we understand ourselves, take responsibility for ourselves, and form really meaningful, worthwhile relationships with other people? My work background goes back to, I retrained in this area in about 2006, 2007. I taught on a fantastic course called the Hoffman Process for 7 years, which took me up. It was a very personal piece of personal development work, which really got me to working with people at almost like a therapeutic level, almost to understand themselves and how they're bringing themselves to the world. And then started working with groups and building up my one-to-one work as well. So mostly I work with organisations now. I've worked with about 15,000 people over the last 10 years. And I think the thing that why I'm passionate about leadership really comes out of that, because personal development as a piece of work is very focused on the individual. What is an individual has to do? And if we look across, LinkedIn is a great place to get samples of this. Here's my routine. Here's the thing that I've done. Here's my hack that's helped me. And it's so much pressure on individuals to change and to create their own performance and manage their own behavior. But the reality is, we are very much creatures of our context. So much of what we think and feel and do come out of the contexts that we live in. Leadership creates that context. And whenever I go into an organization, I'm asked to sort of do an intervention and help people, I will always go, what's the system that people are sitting inside? And how healthy is that? And that's where leadership comes in. It creates the context where everything else can happen. Without that, it's a very unfair pressure on individuals to change. But leaders really can make a difference.
Thank you, Tom. Great to have you here, and great to have you too, Christine. So today, as we've said, we're going to be focused on purpose-led leadership, and I guess purpose-driven leaders are those that place a real emphasis on their values and their own purpose, whilst making decisions for the company and formulating, competitive strategies. And there's tons of research bubbling around at the moment, which we're very familiar with at Capfinity, because we do work in the early careers space, that Generation Z are looking for purpose, in their work. And that actually is part of the sort of decision making they're making when it comes to which organisations they're going to join. I think they say that 74% of Generation Z who were surveyed ranked purpose as more important than what they were going to earn in a study conducted by Monster. And I guess, to be honest, most of us probably prefer to work somewhere where we really believe in the purpose of the organisation. And I suppose there's sort of, as a buzzword, there's a couple of things that I've thought about around this. One is the fact that all organisations have a mission or a vision statement. But then as a leader, we've got to think about, what's the purpose for our team? What is it that my team's going to do to make a difference now? And how are we going to connect with that broader mission of the company? And then secondly, how can we bring that to life and really engage people? Because surely that's a critical part of purpose-led leadership, how we communicate it. And I think the thing that I see as a real challenge for leaders now is, I suppose, weaving in how our area of work makes a positive difference to the community around us, the wider society, or even the planet. It's not just about how is it going to increase the bottom line and be competitive. A lot more is being expected of leaders in how they communicate their purpose. So let's kick off with our first question. And I'm going to come to Christine first of all. So Christine, in your experience, what does strong purpose-led leadership really look and sound like in practice?
Yeah, I think you covered quite a lot there already, Steph, but for me, it's very much around leaders who truly know what they stand for and what their values are, and actually they show up every day, and actually it's just how they act, behave, how they talk, how they interact with people, and they're determined around it. They're clear, they're determined. They have, it makes it easy for them to set expectations of others because they know what is really, really important. There's a drive and an energy that goes with being leaders like this. It's like, there's a passion that comes with that, and that's quite compelling. And actually, it makes people want to follow them, because if they then kind of have enough people around them who hold the same purpose, they can make remarkable things happen. So I think one of the things that's really important for me, and the thing that I really notice, is that purpose-led leaders lead themselves that way as much as the organisation. So it's not just something that they come to work to do and they suddenly become the purpose-led leader. They're actually that leader at home with their families, when they're out with the kids on a weekend, when they're interacting with, it's who they are. And, there is a kind of an anchor that is within, that centres them and helps them to know what is true and good for them. And I think that makes it quite compelling for other people. and also easy for other people to decide, do I want to be part of this team? Do I really want to follow this person? Or actually, maybe I don't actually. If that's what they stand for and I don't stand for that, then actually maybe that helps me to make a decision as well. So I think it's all of those qualities that stand out for me for what a really good purpose-led leader looks like.
I bet some of that chimes with you, doesn't it, Tom, in terms of the personal and professional and the consistency between the two, knowing you?
Totally. I'm trying to think what to say, which doesn't repeat what Christina said there. I think absolutely the theme of authenticity and that sense that we get that we know when we're with somebody who is connected to their purpose and working towards it. And there's energizing in them, but also how that sort of inspiration, that connection then gets spread out to other people. So then they're inspired and they're energized and they can add into the activities as well. So I totally agree with everything Christine said. I would sort of add on one extra, which is for me, there's around the simplicity of communication. And there's something I realized a few years ago, that the best teachers are ones who manage to condense years and years and years of wisdom and put it into a message which is clear and concise and very easily communicable. And I see exactly the same in leaders as well, that when they get hold of that sense of purpose and they can get it and express it, and it's not, they don't save it for a once a year presentation. It's a piece that can come out daily, weekly, whenever's needed to help connect themselves and each other to the purpose that they've connected to. So yes, I'd say there's a simplicity about it.
I love that.
The other thing, Tom, you were making me think about there was actually there's a long-term thing for me as well around, the purpose-led leader. It's often something that is sustainable over much longer than this performance year or next performance year or what have you. There's a very kind of long-term sustainability point. And just reflecting on my own career in Aviva, at the heart of Aviva is our customer, and actually we've always stood for trying to make things better for customers, and I've hooked to that since day one. And so the purpose of the organisation and the leaders in the organisation, that's really come through really strongly for me throughout my entire career here. And as a result, I've stayed in an organisation. And that's what also happens. Talented people stay with organisations where there is a purpose that people can hook to.
Yeah.
And it's very stabilising as well, isn't it? That's what's, because I was just talking to a group this morning actually about that sort of how useful connecting to purpose is through times of change and how it helps just to ground people. It was almost like there's a feeling that we land in that sense of purpose, and then the changes which come through, we can weather them, we can move through them as well.
I loved what you were saying earlier, Christine, about helping to inform people's decisions about whether to work for a leader or work with an organisation. I think when you see purpose-led leaders in action, there's this sense of being quite unapologetic for what they believe in, right? Like this is, but not in a forceful way, but just this is my belief. And, if you share this, then this is the bus to get onto. But if you don't, there's an equally brilliant bus, but it's not over there, but it's not this one. I think that's in keeping, isn't it, with this general trend around authenticity that's come through from a leadership perspective in recent years. So that's really interesting. And we know that, some people find finding their purpose easy and some find that hard. And that's, something that, we kind of grapple with as individuals. And I think leaders as well. It was interesting, Tom, when you were saying earlier about it being, something that should be able to be communicated regularly. And I think there is a misconception that sharing your purpose is something you do annually at your annual conference or, in your monthly town hall. But actually it should be this everyday event. And we also know that actions speak louder than words in terms of leaders actually living and breathing that purpose kind of daily. I think the really key thing, isn't it, for leaders is to enable those around them to engage, well, to find their own purpose and engage with the organisational purpose. And we know that those things are intrinsically linked. And so at Catfinity, we're often trying to help organisations find ways of making that link. We heard a really lovely piece from a head of talent that we interviewed recently for a white paper that we published. And she was saying that her organisation do this thing called purpose carving, which is where they actually give time to everybody in the business to stop down tools and take stock on their own purpose and the level of affinity that they're feeling with the organisation's purpose. And what they found over time as they've tracked that is that actually well-being scores have increased and engagement scores around connection with the purpose have increased as they've kind of introduced that activity. So I am interested, as I'm sure our audience are, in what other innovative ways you have seen for leaders to connect their teams with the organisation's wider purpose. What other kind of tricks have you seen? Tips and hints work quite well. Tom, I'll come to you first in this instance.
Can I step back a moment, because I'm so glad you brought this up as a subject, and the first bit you said is that a lot of people might have a struggle with that, and it's another one, I guess, looked across LinkedIn, whatever, and you'll see link to your purpose, live your purpose, dream your purpose. And then I think there's an enormous cohort of people out there, and probably people who are attracted to this video, who might be stepping up and going, yes, but I'm not quite sure what it is.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of people out there with that as a particular challenge. And if I can just briefly what I think that the problem is, or what gets in the way on that. And the biggest one that I think I've seen is around the concept of attention. And how much our attention is broken up. And that lovely story you've got of an organisation that's saying to people, okay, just stop for a moment. There's a very book which has been very influential on me. It's called Stand Out of Our Light by an ethicist and philosopher, James Williams. And he said that we've got different, we talk about the light of our attention. What is it that we put our light onto in order to really concentrate on? And he says there's three different types of light that we have. He says we have a spotlight, which is that concentration on a problem. I've got a report to write, a piece of feedback to give, a meeting I need to prepare for, that problem-solving spotlight. But he says we've got other types of attention which are important as well in our lives. One of them, he calls it daylight, which is those moments where we just stop and reflect on ourselves. What is it that I'm caring about? What has been difficult for me? What have I loved today? What are my strengths that have been in place for the day? Those moments of understanding ourselves. And the third one he calls is called starlight, and that navigating star of things like our purpose and our highest values that we can always keep an eye on. Even if we've got difficulties now, we can lift up and see it. So the spotlight, the daylight, and the starlight, and these all get very, very disrupted in our working lives. And two separate studies looked at how much uninterrupted time people had. For employees, the average was 6 minutes of uninterrupted time in the day. It's the longest chunk of a day that they have, which is completely uninterrupted from any instant messages, anything coming in at all. For CEOs, so people who have EAs to organise their diaries and who know that strategic thinking is important, that goes up to 28 minutes. And that's the maximum. And the pressure on ourselves, again, this is going back to my first point about our context. We have a lot of pressure to say, understand, live, connect to your purpose. How can we do that if our day is chopped up into 6-minute segments? So I think that simple act that you're saying, of we can look for innovative ways to do this, and I think there are lots of resources out there. But I'd say the most important one is stepping back, is time, is that uninterruption, and just being really aware of how interrupted those different types of attention are. Because, just last point, James Williams talks about the fact that once he got his device, his phone, he looked back and realised instead of making sense of the world, it was actually doing the opposite. He was experiencing a decoherence in his life. And putting aside these amazing tools that we have, I think, is one of the ways we can get that sense of coherence back in again, and that stability going, this is me. This is a fact about what I care about. It's a thing. I'm not going to question it. I'm just going to explore it and accept it.
Thank you for sharing that. That sounds like a fantastic read. The simplicity of that, and people have been reflecting, haven't they, on the loss of the commute as being a time of that reflection and that time. And I think it's another example of where we can possibly be feeling the impact of that. Thank you, Tom. Christine, does that chime again with what you're doing at Aviva or what you've seen elsewhere?
Yeah, definitely. The reflection time really does. A couple of other thoughts around it. I think it's really important that purpose-led leaders have enough people around them who also share a similar passion. But at the same time, they also have enough disruptors around them to keep challenging and pushing and having a different voice in the room as well, because that will help them to be the best that they can possibly be. And so I think in thinking about how we set ourselves up as leaders in our leadership teams, every single person is an important appointment. And getting that right is really, really important. And I think we need to make sure that we're thinking enough about values and purpose as we select people into these important roles. So I think that would be one thing. My other thought on this would be that actually there's so much wizzy technology out there, which is fabulous, that we can be using. We talked about social media and Twitter and on you go. I think it's really important to create time for conversation, actually. And actually anything that prompts conversation is really, really good. I really think that conversations change organisations. And so we absolutely need to create time and space for the reflection that Tom was talking about earlier, but time and space for people across any organisation to have conversations around purpose, conversations around values, around priorities, around what really matters around here. And every single one of those conversations helps to nudge an organisation in the direction that you want it to. And ultimately, the performance of a company is only ever made up of the individual performance of everybody in that company. So therefore, if you get everybody steering in the same direction and having the right conversations around that, I think you unlock a level of potential in organisations that you wouldn't otherwise see. And so fabulous to use all of the different tools and techniques that are out there these days. And if that really encourages more conversation and discussion about difficult things, as well as, reinforcing the positive, I think we change for the better.
I've had a personal realization of what you have both just described in terms of the power of taking the time and then having the conversation. So a few years ago, when I was starting out a new arm of a business, I was so back to back and going from one thing to the next, and so focused on narrating the story of the business externally to clients that it was actually someone in my team said, that would be really useful to hear, actually, Celine, kind of what you what you passionate about, and why have you done what you've done. I was like, oh my goodness, of course. And so that, and I guess I had made the assumption that because I was so clearly passionate about it, that would be really obvious to everyone that was working with me, or every day. And actually realizing that I needed to take the time, and then I needed to articulate that and have that conversation was a real learning moment for me. And it draws upon what both of you were saying, so I concur. Very good feedback.
And Celine, the other thing that you're making me think about was sometimes it's quite a courageous step to be the leader that shares what you really stand for. Actually, that it doesn't come to people just immediately, and actually sometimes it takes years and years and years and years and years to work that out. And then once you get to that, sharing that can actually be quite a big moment for people to do that. And you know, our leaders need support in being able to do that as well.
Definitely.
Just add in a couple more, actually, just sort of realizing, that other things that I have actually done recently. You said the word feedback, and I was like, of course, actually, the feedback process for me, standing up in front of the room and people really working with detail with me about what was that, what did you do, and helping unpack that was a difficult process, but a very important one for me to connect into that sense of why am I here, and making sure that I'm authentically connecting with the people I work with. I had a very extraordinary experience recently doing training in virtual reality coaching that provided me with an insight that was so extraordinarily simple that it had just been sitting in front of my face all the time. That is a real personal connection in. So that was a fantastic one as well. Something I'm sort of hearing a lot about and talking a lot about and having conversations about and creating workshops even about is around the concept of play. And that's a very sort of roundabout route into a lot of different areas of our life. But it would basically just sort of get underneath that over-processing, thinking, analytical side of ourselves. And anything we can do just to step out of that part of our brain, very necessary for a while, and step into these other types of thinking is very beneficial in this area as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tom. Virtual reality coaching with Capfinity, Tom, of course. Look at him, tight-lipped.
29 episodes to plug that. I think you've done quite well, Steph.
Brilliant. Okay, well, another packed episode with lots of tips and tools. So in summary, I guess, the main takeaways for me, I think we all talked at the beginning about that passion and drive and energy that comes from a purpose-led leader and how it's very much noticeable in everything they do, whether that be at home or at work. And it's an anchor, I think Christine said, which was just a lovely phrase for describing that. And then I think I really loved what Tom said around in times of change, purpose can really help to sort of ground us and helps us to weather the storm. I'm sure lots of us have felt like we've been through a storm in the last few years of change and of turmoil. And it's really critical there. And then we've had some discussion around, you know, the need to really create space to think about purpose and where our attention is distracted and so on. And I was quite interested in that final, Christine, you mentioned something around the need for conversation, the fact that leaders who have purpose attract other people who want to follow that purpose, but then the need to have different voices and disruption. And in my mind, I was thinking, oh, is that a pitfall of purpose-led leadership? Like if we all think the same, we're all driven by the same purpose, could that cause us a problem with D&I? And that's kind of an interesting thought I'd like to explore another day. But yeah, brilliant to have all of you. So I'd like to come to you for a final comment. So Tom, what's your final takeaway for the audience?
I think the one about authenticity is keeps coming back in my mind. And in terms of the everydayness of it, I mean, if I was to say to it as a group of people here watching, if I say, hi, come and follow me, you know, the first question that will come to everybody's mind is, well, where are we going and why? And if I want you as a leader to follow me, I've got to articulate those, and I need to articulate them in really human, everyday, authentic language. So that you can connect to me and trust to me, and that you can make that decision to come along. And that is the daily decision that people who are led by leaders are taking. And so leaders have that absolute responsibility to articulate that clearly.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tom. And Christine?
Thank you. Yeah, I think the biggest transformation lever that any organisation has is the quality of its leadership. So it is really worth investing the time in creating the space for the conversation to work out what the purpose-led leadership is for your organisation, because conversations change organisations.
Brilliant. Love that. Thank you, Christine. And Celine, final word from you.
I'm just interested in what a world would look like where we're a little bit kinder to ourselves And if we were all to lean into this notion of it's okay to not know what your purpose is, it's okay for your purpose to change over time, and it's okay to not want to get on the bus that has a particular purpose on the front, and let's just try to be kinder and more honest with how we feel about ourselves and how we feel about organizations, and do things that feel good for us and work for organizations that make us feel good. But let's do that. Why don't we do that? Let's do that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Celine. So a huge thanks to our audience and to our guests today. We will be back in 2 weeks' time for episode 30, and the topic will be leadership in education. So we've got someone who leads the Church of England education programs, which head teachers attend, and also a head teacher from the front line joining us to talk about some of the challenges they've faced over the last couple of years. So we're really looking forward to that episode. Please join us then. Christine, Tom, thank you for taking your time out today. It's been great to have you with us, and see you all very soon.